You're watching News Channel 8 Midday.
Eagles fans are riding an all-time high today after winning their very first Super Bowl, but the game isn't all that we paid attention to last night. Of course, there's the halftime show, we just saw that, and then those commercials.
They paid a lot of money. Did any of them get the job done? We're joined now by Prashant Malaviya, I beg your pardon, sorry, Professor. He's an expert in consumer psychology, advertising, and branding, and a really good person to talk about what very often turn out to be better than the game. Yesterday, I think the game finally transcended the commercials in a lot of ways. Would you agree?
Absolutely. I think the game was very interesting, and I was following the game more closely than the ads, which I have always told my students I follow the ads better than the game, but yesterday certainly was the other way around.
Okay.
All right, taken as a whole, how would you rate this year's group of ads?
I think this year was a little underwhelming compared to many other years in the recent past. I don't think there was one single standout commercial that would feature in a top 10 Super Bowl commercial video in the next few years. I think in general the advertisers stayed away from politics as much as they could. There were only a handful of social causes that they were willing to endorse and talk about. So it was much more run-of-the-mill advertising, and I think from that perspective advertisers maybe lost a beat in not making use of a captive audience like no other captive audience for advertising.
So was there a winner, do you think?
I think there were two in my mind that stood out. One was Alexa. I think Alexa did a really good job, especially building on last year when they had Alec Baldwin. This year, I think they did a better job than that. And I think the most clever set of advertising came from Tide. With their commercials, giving us the impression that these are commercials of something else. And by the way, that reminded me of many years ago when the Energizer Bunny would show up in different ads. I thought Tide was doing a similar thing and catching our attention.
Yeah, they used the Clydesdale horse, which is
did.
Budweiser.
Yeah,
they used Mr. Clean.
They did, yes.
And the other
Old Spice on the horse.
Yes, the Old Spice guy,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so you're thinking it's one of those ads, but then it turns around and say, no, this is
Absolutely.
a Tide ad.
Yeah.
So that one worked. A lot of people today are telling me they liked that Dirty Dancing ad, where they had the swan dive at the end and the lift. I kept one. It was for the New York Giants. I kept wondering, what is this ad for?
Well, it was actually for the NFL.
NFL. Yeah.
So it's more for the NFL, and I think the NFL, given that this is the NFL show, the Super Bowl Sunday is about NFL, so they are promoting themselves.
At a time when ratings are down, there's a lot of criticism about players kneeling for the national anthem and things like this. And my wife was watching this very carefully, and she says, that is exactly the dance that they did in Dirty Dancing. So the fact that, that Manning and Beckham maybe
pulled it off.
Kind of pulled it off.
They did.
No one's going to confuse Eli Manning for a dancer, but it was pretty good, I thought.
I thought they did a very good job, and and I think it's to some extent it's a reaction to the fact that you mentioned the ratings are low. People are concerned about the injuries that result from this. And by the way, the same similar dynamic applies in the Tide commercial. With everything going on about the Tide Pod Challenge, this was a way for the brand to sort of recover some of its lost interest from consumers.
All right, and talk about how humor plays a role in a lot of these ads. And one of I thought was humorous was the Jeff Goldblum pretending that he was back in Jurassic Park driving his Jeep.
Right,
and it was all in his mind.
It's all in his mind. And I think, Jeep did a good job on a couple of their ads. The other one was the one where they don't want to talk about, all the big abstract ideas that many brands want to promote. They just want to show how the Jeep Wrangler can
through a stream and up
a
waterfall.
Exactly, yeah. So, I think the humor this year was there, but it wasn't the cutting-edge humor that we have often seen in the past. Instead, I think what this year showed to me was there were many brands that were willing to experiment and try new things in different ways. And, I gave the example of Tide. The other one, I think, was Kraft, which tried to get us to send them videos and pictures during the show. But I don't think it really caught on that well, and they didn't do a great job of executing. But it was a good idea.
How much of what we saw yesterday is a product of the times in which we live that have been very contentious, and very often it's neighbor versus neighbor because politics has gotten into so much of everything that we do. does that maybe make advertisers trim their sales a little bit? Let's don't do anything that's particularly controversial. See if we can sell the product, and if they smile at it, then we've done our jobs.
I think, you know, the advertisers react more to what they perceive is the consumer sentiment. And I think the consumer sentiment is, we don't want so much politics anymore. We are a little tired of this. Our mental capacity is sort of, you know, exhausted. So the advertisers dial back. If you think about it, the only one theme that seemed to be consistently emerging across various brands was, how can we come together? You know, Coke did that, Toyota did that, you know, Mass Mutual did that. There were several brands that tried to do that by saying, how can we come together? That seemed to be the only sort of more emphatic theme that we observed, you know, through that entire show.
And there was a Verizon ad that sort of was a shout out to first responders.
Exactly, yeah.
And it wasn't directly an ad for Verizon,
exactly,
but it was like, hey,
yes,
because of us, that
yes,
call got through.
Absolutely.
So
yes,
that
yeah,
kind of, I thought that worked pretty well.
That was a very powerful statement. Yes, absolutely.
All right, let's talk about the money. A lot of money, of course, always spent on these Super Bowl in the millions. Did the advertisers, do they get their bang for their buck?
So I think they do get their bang for the buck if their execution is so iconic that it gets talked about the next day. Right? You know, if we speak about it on Twitter, or if we speak about it in our own, you know, water cooler chatter, then it is really worth it. And I think on that count, really, I think that, you know, many of the ads fail to deliver on the marketing equation here, and I don't think delivered on the ROI as well as they could have.
It's not so much the subliminal as it is the social, I guess, anymore.
Yes.
It's if we're talking about it, maybe good or bad, you've at least accomplished something, rather than sitting back and saying, wow, I really like the sentiment there. Okay.
And, you know, from that perspective, all the talk about the Ram commercial using Martin Luther King's voiceover is being debated. You know, it's not clear to me that it's going to do good for the brand, but certainly the brand is being talked about.
At least we're talking about the brand.
And it is fun to talk about them the day after. Always love to talk about the Super Bowl ads. Dr. Prashant Malaviya, he's a professor of marketing and senior associate dean of MBA programs at Georgetown University School of Business. Great to talk to you and to get your perspective today.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Doc.